Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a replay analysis of a Master Tier 1 Protoss versus Protoss. Now, I would like to preface this by saying that this game is actually for random, and everybody in this game spawned into Protoss. So it should definitely be an interesting analysis. But just sort of to kind of explain the thought process here. Yeah, in this matchup, you don't want to be doing what I'm doing here, where I do the wall. Um, and it's not so much that it's bad; it's just that the mining time that you lose between the Nexus and the build point is pretty significant in this matchup. So it's kind of okay in this game simply because nobody knows what each other's race is, right? And furthermore, you typically in 2v2, you typically do not want to open with a 1 gate expand against 2 Protoss. But in this sort of a situation, it just kind of is what it is because you just don't know what the races are. Because you can see, I mean, at the time that this probe hit our base, right? The builds are already established. Like he's got a Nexus, he's got 1 gate. This guy's got 1 gate. I mean, it doesn't matter if you scout right off the rip, you're just not going to know, right? So most players on a map of this size are going to opt for the gateway expand. So if it's random versus random, I think it's okay. But if you know you're playing against 2 Protoss, then you want to make sure that you're opening with something like a 2 gate. Because those first 2 adepts in this matchup can do a metric fuck ton of damage. But anyway, so he gets in here, he starts scouting around. We don't scout, so we're playing in the dark. But by default, when you are playing as 2 Protoss, by default, one player is going to play ground and the other player is going to play air. Why? Because this is the strongest composition that you can put together from the 2 Protoss perspective. It does not matter what your opponents have spawned as. Makes no difference. You never, ever, ever want to play 2 ground. Well, that's not entirely true. You can play 2 ground against 2 Terran, but that is the only kind of sorta I can kind of sorta get away with playing 2 ground, right? So anyway, my point is that in this matchup, you want to make sure that, or I should say, if you've spawned in this race comp, you should make sure that one's playing ground and the other's playing air. And so anyway, this player that I'm playing with is a subscriber to my stream, and I've played quite a few games with him, and he knows how to play, and we've got an agreement on who goes what in what matchup and things like that. So that's just kind of sort of why I'm playing the way I'm playing here. Realistically, though, I should have scouted in this game because we're playing against 2 random. I should scout, but I don't. I'm being lazy. So anyway, because I don't scout, I have to build this robotics, but I have to build the 2 gateways before I build the robotics. Just in the event of an all-in, right? So it's definitely not the most economical build, but it will oftentimes keep you safe against pretty much everything. It gives you detection, it gives you enough units to defend. But in this game, because there hasn't even been a Reaper that's popped up into the base, I'm thinking, okay, so what do I want to do here? I decided in this game to take a risk, and this is actually a really, really bad play. This is a really bad play. And the reason is because if they go for 2 base all in, let's say they had like proxies set up and I take this 3rd base, this is just a really bad play, right? But I don't know. I'm just rolling the dice. I decide to roll the dice from start to finish, and that's exactly what I do. I mean, I go so far as to take the double forge after the third base. So it's a really, really bad play. But of course, if you get lucky and you get away with it, well, obviously you're going to be in a really, really good spot going into the later stages of the game, right? So, I mean, I just sort of do this because they haven't scouted. Although there actually was, I didn't notice it in game, but there was an observer that I saw over my mineral line here, so they did actually scout it. And that sort of makes sense. Because they do end up doing a push at some point. But I digress. So, I mean, essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just committing to ground, and I'm just trying to get up an economy so as to do a gateway explosion and just bolster my army with good upgrades and a large army. Actually, did he take that at the same time I did? Okay, so mine's it's actually significantly quicker. But I think that nexus that he has there was a reaction to the observer that came into my base. But anyway, so from here, we know that it's 2 Protoss, right? So I'm kind of wigging out. I need to get up these gates, and because now that I've identified that it's 2 Protoss, it's like, uh-oh. So then my teammate goes across the map and he loses all of his Phoenixes. So this is kind of sort of where my risk pays off. Because when he loses all of his Phoenixes, we need something that can hold on until he can rebuild his Phoenix count, right? So it kind of works out in the end, right? But truth be told, what should have happened was when they lost, like when let's see, what's the Phoenix count now? Okay, so let's say it's not that bad. But I think after that trade, what these 2 players should have done is they should have just crossed the map after he took that bad trade. Because, I mean, they had the information. They know that I've taken this really quick third because of that observer that came into the base. So I think that's what they should have done. So anyway, from here, I have this observer like parked at the front of the base, and I'm constantly paying attention to this observer, and I can see the trajectory of units, right? So if they're going to the right, it's unlikely that they're going to attack. But if they're going south, then it's pretty likely they're going to attack, right? So it didn't. It looked to me like it was just going to be Phoenix harass. So I take the 4th base. Because I feel pretty confident that there's not going to be any sort of a push. So I pick off a couple of Phoenixes there, which is actually significant because I have such a better economy at this point. I can feed gas to my teammate so that he can have, even if his economy is worse, he's going to have a better army. Assuming that the opponents aren't doing the same. Which typically you won't see. Typically you will not see 2 Protosses feeding each other resources back to back. So anyway, I see this push coming, and I identify the disruptors. So, and I know that because I got away with this third base, I'm going to be able to blink on top of those disruptors and basically just win the fight. But you want to start building zealots when you see disruptors like this, because it is incredibly hard to micromanage speed zealots with disruptor. So here I have to make sure I get the disruptors ASAP. And then from here, I need to help my teammate, because the important part here is if I help my teammate and he resets the Phoenix count, then my teammate can lift all of the stalkers and just basically make that Stalker, Immortal, Sentry, Archon army invalid, right? So my macro here is pretty poor, but the micromanagement was good. So I had bad micro at the cost of having decent, or excuse me, bad macro at the cost of having decent micromanagement. So we take an incredibly good win trade, or an incredibly good trade there. And from this point forward, it's really just a matter of building a big army, taking a fifth base, building a big army, and then just walking across the map and winning the game, because, you know, this matchup is extremely volatile. The moment that you take a bad trade like that, you will typically, the game will pretty much be over from that point forward. And so you can risk it by walking across the map and losing your army, or you can get further ahead by taking the fifth base and just building an army. Right? Like, there's no universe where they're going to ever be able to do anything against my army, because I took that greedy third base that paid off. So, you know, I mean, I'm just miles and miles and miles and miles ahead. So, you know, I mean, you could be aggressive instead of taking the fifth base, but you might as well just take the fifth base, because then that's gonna give you a much higher chance of securing a victory rather than just walking across the map after you've taken a good trade, right? So, you know, from here it's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not really much they can do. They do hold on pretty well, though. And essentially, the reason for this is because we're fighting into their macro, right? We've crossed the map. So our units, you know, I've got a warp prism crossing, but I don't have it there, right? So we don't really have any reinforcements. And my teammates' Phoenixes, they're crossing the map. So again, it's the concept here is that you're fighting into the macro. You're fighting into the reinforcements, whereas your reinforcements have to cross the map. And that's just sort of how StarCraft is balanced. No, I mean, unless, of course, you're playing Protoss, where you can warp units anywhere on the map. So anyway, it's pretty straightforward from here. There's not really too much that the opponents can do, just because they took that one bad trade. Which, you know, I mean, truth be told, they kind of needed to, because my economy was getting completely out of control, right? So I don't think it was the wrong play. It just didn't work out for them, right? So that's going to be it for the replay. If you guys like this type of content, hit that thumbs up. If not, hit the thumbs down. Leave a comment if you would like anything else. Have a good day, boys. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.